Hi friends, today's lecture is an introduction to limit state method of reinforced cement concrete. Now firstly, reinforced cement concrete means cement concrete which is now added with another material called as steel, uh, which will be taking tension. So now that same steel in different grades or different forms is used for construction as RCC. Now this steel is now called as reinforcement. As we all know, concrete is strong in compression and steel is strong in tension. Now these both together will carry the loads and act as a good structural member. Now in the design of reinforced cement concrete structures, there are different methods for designing the different members, as we flexural members, cement, and then compression members, and then torsional members, and so on and so forth. So in today's lecture we will be seeing what are the different methods for the design of reinforced cement concrete, and in that method in those methods we will be learning about the limit state method which is currently in use now. So let's moving on to the lecture. The methods of RCC design consists of, see, a reinforced concrete structure should be designed to satisfy the following criteria. What we understand from this is simply going with the design is not the main issue. The main issue with the design is it should satisfy few criteria. So firstly it has to satisfy the criteria of safety in terms of stiffness and durability, and it should also be in a reasonable economy. The construction should not cost heavy, it should be a reasonable in price, and as well as it should also adhere to the safety norms. So in terms of stiffness and durability also it should be properly established, and as well as economy wise also it should be reasonable. So the main objective of reinforced cement concrete design is to achieve a structure that will result in a safe and economical solution. Safe and economical, so safety has to be kept in mind, at the same time economy is also to be considered. So for a given structural system, design problem consists of so many steps. Any structural system, the problem of design should be done by keeping few parameters in mind. Number one is idealization of structure for analysis. You have to idealize the structure, that means there should be a symmetry, proper symmetry must be there in the structure, and as well as the members should be carrying forces within their permissible limits. That means one member carrying high amount of force and another member carrying very low amount of force. That kind of idealization should not be done. So the structure has to be analyzed mm, betterly or precisely into an idealized form. So this analysis is done in your structural analysis subject, where you will be analyzing determinate structures, indeterminate structures, all the structures you will be analyzing by different methods of structural analysis. You, at the same time you will be analyzing the frames. Analyzing in the sense you will be finding out the amount of force or the stress the member can be carrying without failure. So you have to idealize the structure properly firstly, and then you have to estimate the loads. So the loads must be estimated properly, because you should not estimate the loads to be higher, and as well as at the same time it should not be estimated to be a very low value. So proper estimation of loads should also be done before going for the design. And then you have to analyze, idealize the structural model to determine the thrust, axial thrust, axial force which it can carry. You should analyze the members of the structure, or you have to analyze the idealized structure for the force as well as for the shear force, for the shear it is going to carry, and as well as for the bending moments that are going to come, and the safe bending moments the structural element can carry, and also for the deflections, the deflection, the maximum deflection that has to be occurring in the structural member, and as well as what is the deflection that is going to occur because of the loads. So before going for design you have to keep few parameters in your mind, and one of them is the forces, the shear forces, the bending moments, and as well as the deflections. And you have to properly design the structural elements one after the other. You should see what kind of a structural element is that. For example, a beam is a flexural member, a column is a compression member, and again a foundation. And similarly you have the slab, and so on and so forth. You have to first analyze the structural elements properly, and you have to individually design the structural elements, because all these structural elements will give rise to a structure. So these individual elements has to be analyzed, has to be designed, and then they have to be clubbed together, they have to be bonded together, then it becomes a structure. And you have to also need to have a designed detailed structural drawings, and you should also have a proper scheduling of reinforcing bars, because these structural drawings play a very important role. Why? Because the design is basically done by an engineer, but whereas the construction process is done by labor or the other field laborers. So the design diagram or the structural drawings will play a very crucial stage in this case, because the laborer who is actually constructing the building or the structure will read the drawing, so that by reading the drawing he can figure out what is the requirement of the design, and he can easily interpret it, and he can easily be able to draw the or construct the required structure. So detailed structural drawings play a very important role. And also you have to give the scheduling of reinforcing bars. The detailed schedule of the reinforcing bars must be also be given. What is the diameter of the bar, at what length you have to cut the bar, what distance you have to place the bars, for columns, for slabs, for beams, for footings, and so on. So these detailing has to be provided. So while going for RCC design, first thing what you have to keep in mind is the design should satisfy the safety norms and as well as the economical norms firstly. And then for the design to start, it has to pass through few steps, wherein the step number 1 consists of the idealization of structure. You have to properly analyze the structure using the tools of structural analysis and strength of materials. You will be using the formulas and the other methods which are present there to analyze the structure properly. Analyzing the structure and idealizing the structure. Idealizing the structure means you have to optimally you have to use the structure, and then you have to estimate the loads properly. You should not be exaggerated, the load should not be exaggerated, neither the load should be limited, neither load should be limited. So you have to estimate the loads. You have to analyze the idealized structure model for all the forces, the axial force, the shear force, the bending moment, the deflections, everything you have to analyze. And then you have to design the structural elements individually, one after the other, like the footing separately, the column separately, the beam separately, and the slab separately. You have to design the structural elements separately, and then you have to also have the drawings, the detailed structural drawings, and you should also have the proper schedule of the reinforcing bars. This final drawings and the details of the reinforcing bars will be given to the labor. The labor will be using these drawings for the construction of the structure according to the requirement. Now for the design, there are three philosophies. For the design of RCC, there are three philosophies which are known as the working stress method, which is known as WSM, the ultimate load method, and also the limit state method, LSM, limit state method. This is the recent technology which is being used. So now moving on to the definitions. Now the working stress method, it was prevalent during 1900s until the early 1960s. If you see the history of the working stress method, it was prevalent in during 1900s until 1960s. Later on, what happened is the ultimate load method came into the use because of its more rational approach compared to working stress method. Ultimate load method was having a more rational approach. So from 1970s there has been a transition to the limit state. So 1960s to 1970s ultimate load method was prevailing, and then after 1970s limit state method came into picture because of its having more rational approach compared to the ultimate load method. So what are the major features of this limit state method which actually made it to overcome the ultimate load method is that it has more rational approach compared to the ultimate load method, and moreover it is addressing the serious drawbacks which are caused by the ultimate load method. So IS 456 2000 code for the design of RCC and IS 1343/1980 code for the design of prestressed concrete are based on the limit state method approach. And the working stress method has been fastly disappearing from practice. Now, going to the definition of working stress method, this method is based on linear elastic theory. So this is one of the major assumptions of working stress method. They assume that concrete is elastic and linear behavior of stress strain is happening in concrete. So this is one of the major drawback. Actually, concrete is a heterogeneous material. We have seen in the previous lecture wherein you have seen that concrete does not behave linearly, whereas it behaves in a curvilinear process. So curvilinear shape of stress strain is not considered in working stress method. They have assumed that the concrete is also behaving linearly as in the case of steel. So this method ensured adequate safety by suitably restricting the stress in the materials which are induced by the working loads on the structures. So what they have done, what the assumption that is taken in working stress method is, first, the first assumption is they have started assuming that concrete is a linearly behaving material in terms of stress and strain, which is not. And then the second thing what they have assumed is they started restricting the ultimate stress which can the materials take. So they started restricting the stress. So in case if you see, if concrete can take up to 100 MPa, the ultimate stress which just concrete can take in compression is 100 MPa, so it has been reduced to 50 MPa. So they started assuming that it can take only up to 50 MPa, and they have started doing the design process. They started restricting, the stress has been restricted here in all the materials they have that are used. It may be steel, it may be concrete, or whatever. They have reduced the stress, the ultimate stress. So this assumption of linear elastic behavior is considered justifiable since the specified permissible stress are kept well below the ultimate strength of the material. See, what we understand from this sentence is, because the permissible stresses that are going to come in the material is kept well beyond the ultimate strength of the materials, so the first assumption, which assumes that concrete is behaving linearly in terms of stress and strain, that could be valid, because they are putting the ultimate strength of the materials to be much lesser values. They are not permitting the ultimate values. Why they are not permitting the ultimate strength values? Because in the working condition, if you assume that the strength is going to be ultimate and you are designing for the ultimate strength, what happens is, once it reaches the ultimate strength value, the concrete will fail suddenly. As the failure of concrete is sudden, and in within fraction of seconds the structure will collapse, you should not design for the final values. So that is why what they have done is they started reducing these ultimate stress values to be permissible stresses. So they have started considering the permissible stresses they are considering. So the first assumption, which says that the linear elastic behavior of stress strain, is also valid to a point. So the working stress method, which was prevalent in 1900s to 1960s, it has been working very good during the 1900s to 1960s, was based on the linear behavior stress strain curve of concrete. So this elastic concept is mainly used for computation of deflections, which are of interest under working loads rather than ultimate loads. So under the working loads, we will be finding out the deflections rather than at the ultimate load. So the working stress method may be used only if it is not possible to adopt the limit state design method. So if it is very difficult to adopt the limit state method for the design of some structural element members, then you can go to the working stress method of design. So this is the main drawback of working stress method. And you can also see the ratio of yield stress of the steel reinforcement or the cube strength of the concrete to the corresponding permissible or working stress is usually called the factor of safety. As you can see, the factor of safety is being used here. What it means to say is that the ultimate strengths are not considered. As we have just seen in the previous slide, the main assumption of working stress method is, working stress method, you will be using the elastic behavior, you will be considering the elastic behavior of concrete, whereas actually the elastic behavior is not happening in the concrete. And also you can see that the permissible stresses are used here. With the ultimate stresses are not used, the permissible stresses are used. So what it mean to say is that, so whenever the in case of permissible stress, if there is permissible stress permissible stress by the actual stress is equals to the factor of safety, is the factor of safety. So what they mean to say is that by dividing this factor of safety, you will be getting the permissible stresses. So considering these permissible stresses, you can design it. And then working stress method uses a factor of safety of about 3 with respect to the cube strength of concrete, and a factor of safety of about 1.8 with respect to the yield strength of steel. So yield strength of steel is denoted by Fy, and cube strength is denoted by Fck. So working stress method generally uses a factor of safety of about 3 with respect to concrete, and a factor of safety of about 1.8 with respect to the yield stress. So this is about working stress method. So concluding about working stress method, what working stress method mentions is that it is an elastic approach, point number one. And second thing, it assumes concrete to be purely elastic. Point number 3, it does not consider the ultimate strength of the members, whereas it considers the permissible strengths or permissible stresses in the members. These permissible stresses are attained by dividing the ultimate strengths by a term called factor of safety. So factor of safety of 3 is used for concrete, and factor of safety is 1.8 is used for steel. So this is about working stress method. Now moving on to the ultimate load method. The ultimate load method is based on the ultimate strength of reinforced concrete. At ultimate load is obtained by enhancing the service load by some factor called as load factor for giving a desired margin of safety. Hence the method is also referred to as the load factor method, or the ultimate strength method, or ultimate load method. Now what happens in ultimate load method is, in the ultimate load method, the strength of the materials is kept the same. Whatever the ultimate strength of the material is there, that is kept the same, but the loads are exaggerated. For example, for the ultimate strength of concrete, if it can take 100 kilonewtons of load, they have started the ultimate load method. What it does is, it can take it says that it can take only 50 kilonewton of load. So Daddy, so this thing, so 50 kilonewton of load. So Daddy, by these, Mommy, in the working loads, the in the ultimate load method, the working loads are increased by suitable factors to obtain ultimate loads. So these factors are called as the load factors. So unlike in the case of working stress method, where the stresses are being reduced to permissible stresses, though they can carry up to ultimate stresses, ultimate load method says that it increases the load. This case, it exaggerates the load to a higher value by multiplying with the load factor. It says that the structure is going to take load up to this much. The structure is going to have loads of this much value, but actually in the real case, the structure is never going to withstand that much load. So when you're designing for higher loads, there is a possibility for having a safe structure. So that is the main philosophy behind the ultimate load method. So ultimate load method, in this you will be having the load factors, whereas in the case of working stress method, you will be having factor of safety. There you will be reducing the stresses, here you will be increasing the loads. So that is the main difference between the working stress method and the ultimate load method. So in the ultimate load method, the stress condition at the state of the pending collapse of the structure is analyzed, thus using the non-linear stress strain curves of concrete and steel. So the safely measure in the design is obtained by the use of proper load factor. The satisfactory strength performance at ultimate loads does not guarantee satisfactory strength performance at ultimate load. Satisfactory strength performance at ultimate loads does not guarantee satisfactory serviceable performance at normal service loads. So uh, the structure which is designed under ultimate load method is to resist the desired ultimate loads. So this method takes into account the non-linear stress strain behavior of concrete. It takes into consideration the non-linear stress strain behavior of concrete. Here it has to do with the load only, as the name of the method itself says, ultimate load method. Ultimate load method will consider, in the ultimate load method, the term load factor has been traditionally used. So what this load factor denotes is that it is the ratio between the collapse or ultimate load to the working load. The knowledge of load factor is more important than the knowledge of factor of safety. It is because in the former case, the designer is able to predict the excess load which a given structure can carry, but beyond the working load without collapse. So the level of stresses is immaterial. So what you can understand, the major difference between the working stress method and the ultimate load method is that in the working stress method, the stresses are being considered, whereas in the ultimate load method, the load is being considered. In the working stress method, the ultimate stresses are being reduced to permissible stresses, whereas in the case of ultimate load method, the load which the structure actually is undergoing is inflated to a higher value by multiplying it with the term load factor. So that is the major difference between the ultimate load method and the working stress method. So several ultimate load theories have been proposed in the past. In the each of these theories, an idealized stress strain curve has been adopted for concrete, which is the only difference among them. In the working stress method, you are having a linear model of stress strain curve, whereas in ultimate load method there is the actual consideration of stress strain curve. So the final result is essentially the same. Whitney's theory, it has been the most popular due to its simplicity. So there are Whitney stress blocks which are considered. So Whitney's theory is the most important theory because it talks about the stress block parameters by considering the actual behavior of the concrete. So this is about ultimate load method. Now moving on to the next method, which is the limit state method. The limit state method, it has originated from ultimate or plastic design. So the other synonym for this method is that it is a plastic design. The object of design is based on the limit state concept. It is to achieve, it is a probabilistic method. So what the aim of this method is that you have to achieve an acceptable probability that a structure will not become unserviceable in its prescribed lifetime for the use for which it is intended. That is, it will not reach the limit state. For example, if you are designing a structure for 50 years, so within the 50 years of design, the structure is never going to reach its limit state. So there should be a certain acceptable probability with which you can surely say that the structure is not going to reach its limit state within the prescribed duration of the design. So this is a probabilistic method. You should give an acceptable probability for a structure or for a structural element that it can withstand the loads which are going to coming on the structure for the prescribed duration of time. So neither there are load factors nor there are permissible stresses. It is based on the probability. So you have to tell the acceptable limits. There should be their acceptable limits for the safety and serviceability requirements of the structure before the failure occurs. So the design of the structure by this method will thus ensure that they will not reach the limit states and will not become unfit for the use for which they are intended. So this is the main concept of limit state method. You have, this is a probabilistic method. You have to assure them with a proper probability that the structure is not going to fail for the intended duration. So a structure with appropriate degrees of reliability should be able to withstand safely all loads that are liable to act on it throughout its life, and it should also satisfy the serviceability requirements such as limitations on deflections and cracking. Limit state method should also give a proper explanation towards serviceability also, because when a structure is showing its failure in some terms, that means it has reached its serviceability. So once the serviceability requirement is not met, then definitely it is not going to serve the intended duration or it is not going to serve during the intended duration of time. So limit state of serviceability plays an important role as a check to the limit state method. So that is the main difference and the unique feature of limit state method. If you see in the working stress method and the ultimate load method, there has been no checks. You have to rely upon the and you have to wait up to the failure. But whereas in the case of limit state method, there is a check on serviceability. So when there is a failure in terms of serviceability, then you can find out that the structure is going to fail or the failure is going to happen in due course of time. So that is the unique feature of limit state method. So it should also be able to maintain required structural integrity during and after accidents such as fires, explosions, and other local failures. So limit state must be considered in design to ensure an adequate degree of safety and serviceability. Now under limit state you have two types. One is the limit state of collapse and another one is the limit state of serviceability. So limit state of collapse, it corresponds to the maximum load carrying capacity. In case if violation of this collapse limit occurs, it implies that there is failure in a sense that a clearly defined limit state of structural usefulness has been exceeded. So however, it does not mean a complete collapse, but it has reached the intended duration. So limit state of collapse will talk about limit state of collapse. Under limit state of collapse, we will be designing structural members under flexure, compression, shear, and torsion. So if you see the definition of limit state of collapse, a limit state of collapse of the structure or part of the structure could be assessed from rupture of one or more critical section and from buckling due to elastic bending. Shear, torsion, and axial loads at every section shall not be less than the appropriate value at that section produced by the probable most unfavorable combination of loads on the structure using the appropriate factor of safety. That means these members which are designed under limit state of collapse, the main concept behind limit state of collapse is that the members are designed for failure. That means the limit state of collapse will be checked in this. The members will be designed for failure. That means in case if a member violation of collapse limit state implies that failure in the sense that a clearly defined limit of structural usefulness has been exceeded. If the member is showing any kind of failure, that means its usefulness has been exceeded. And the next moving on, we have limit state of serviceability. What limit state of serviceability says is that before the complete failure occurs, it shows its failure by means of failing in its serviceability. That means the structure has failed in its serviceability, its service is completed. So this state corresponds to development of excessive deformation and is used for checking members in which magnitude of deformation may limit the use of the structure or its component. Suppose in case if you take an example of a TV, if you while watching a TV, in case if you find a line on the display of a TV, the immediate reaction of the viewers is that they will be thinking about the serviceability. They immediately start saying that the service of the TV is completed. That means the TV has fully not shown it's a failure, but by giving a small line on the display itself, you can say that the limit has reached its, the TV has reached its serviceability requirements. It is about to get failed in the due course of time. So that example will tell you about the limit state of serviceability. For example, if you see a crack in a beam, the beam has completely not fallen down, but the crack on the beam will say that the service of the beam is about to get completed. That means it is going to reach the limit state of collapse in the coming days. So limit state of serviceability will act like a check. So under limit state of serviceability, deflection, cracking, and vibration are used. So the choice of degrees of reliability should take into account the possible consequences of exceeding the limit state of collapse, which may be classified as risk to life negligible and economic consequences small or negligible. So limit state, this is about limit state method, where limit state method is called as the probabilistic method, or it is also called as the plastic design. Now we will be seeing the design concepts, few basic concepts and few terminology which are associated with the limit state design. So till now what we have understood is the three basic methods of design of reinforced cement concrete. Firstly is the working stress method, and second one ultimate load method, and the new technology which is the limit state method. So now we are going to design all the structures using the limit state method. So we will be learning the few terminology, the basic terminology which are associated with the limit state method. So talking about the characteristic and design values and partial safety factors. So these are the three main terminologies which will be which you will be encountering while learning limit state method. So first one is the characteristic strength, the characteristic load. All these terms which are associated with characteristic. So what does this characteristic term mean? Characteristic strength of materials. The term characteristic strength means that the value of the strength of the material below which not more than minimum acceptable percentage of test results are expected to fall. So the characteristic strength, what it means is that the acceptable probability, for example, there is a probability of failure of 5%, that means 0.05. 0.05 is the probability of failing. If you are accepting the term 0.05, then the strength which is associated with that failure is called as your characteristic strength. If you are accepting that probability, the probability of failure is accepted. If the probability of failure is not accepted, then that is not called as your characteristic strength. So in IS 456-2000, it has accepted the minimum percentage of 5% for reinforced concrete structures. This means that there is 5% probability or chance of the actual strength being less than the characteristic strength. For example, you are assuming an M20 grade concrete. So M20 grade concrete, even if it is showing a 5% variation in the strength, even that is accepted in limit state. So IS 456-2000 is accepting a probability acceptance limit of 5%. So whatever loads and strengths which are associated with 5% acceptance of probability are termed as characteristic. When you are talking about stresses, that is called as characteristic stress or characteristic strength. When you are talking about loads, the term simply gets added to the load and it will be termed as characteristic load. So now moving on, these characteristic strength and characteristic loads are actually based on the curve which is shown in the figure. So what is this curve? This is called as normal distribution curve. This is normal distribution curve. So generally in reinforced concrete designs, the strength of a given mix of concrete and the imposed load that is likely to act over a specified area cannot be provided with certainty unless actual measurements are made. So what is the actual load that is going to come on the structure and what is the actual strength that is going to be reciprocated by the structural member, this cannot be told. So these variables are not constant, so that is why these variables are termed as random variables. The strength and the load, these are called as random variables. So these random variables, when they are studied, they will be taking the shape of a normal distribution curve. So the most common way is to study of these random variables is by the probability law, which may be characterized in a number of ways. So the most common way by which you can study this probability distribution is the random variable. So there are several different probability distributions or probability models that are available, but the choice of distribution should be based on an understanding of how the physical situation might have given rise to the distribution in order to make the conclusions as accurate as possible. So what you have to see is that there are many other distribution models and many other probability models, but actually what is suiting the actual scenario is to be picked now. So sometimes in a physical variable, the uncertainty may be the result of the combined effect of many contributing causes, each difficult to isolate and observe. So the normal or Gaussian probability distribution as shown in the figure is most commonly used in such situations. So this the diagram which you are seeing in the slide is called as normal distribution or Gaussian probability distribution curve. So the ability of a curve of this shape to approximate the distribution of the sum of the number of uniformly distributed random variables is not coincidental. Now what you can see is that FCM is the mean strength, whereas FCK in the figure stands for the characteristic strength. So FCK, it is the strength which is corresponding to the failure of 5% of the test results. So this FCK is termed as your characteristic strength. The distance between FCK and FCM is 1.65 times the standard deviation. FCM is the mean strength. So actually from the mean strength, if the deviation of the results is 5%, then that is accepted by the code. So whatever strength that is corresponding to this 5% failure is called as your characteristic compressive strength. So this is a normal distribution curve or Gaussian probability curve which defines the characteristic strength or the characteristic load or whatever load and strength terms that we will be using in the limit state method. Because in the limit state method, the strength parameter and the load parameters both are variables. Now moving on, if you can see, so the strength must be reduced. So what the design strength or the characteristic strength is reduced from the mean strength. You have to generally tell the strength to a lesser value. You have to decrease the strength. So that is why the strength is decreased from the mean strength by minus k into s into d, whereas k is the distance between the mean strength and the characteristic strength, and whereas SD is the standard deviation. That constant k is 1.65, which you can see in the diagram. 1.65 is the difference there. So 1.65 you can see in the diagram, that is the value of k, and SD stands for your standard deviation. So this is the formula for finding out the characteristic compressive strength or characteristic strength of any material using your normal or Gaussian distribution curve. So I hope you have understood the term characteristic strength. Now there is again standard deviation formula. So standard deviation formula you must have been used in your statistical mathematics many times. So the same formula is applied here for the standard deviation, and the n value taken is minimum 30 samples. You have to at least take the values of 30 samples. So n here is 30, which is being prescribed by IS 456-2000. Now moving on, characteristic strength of concrete. So characteristic strength of concrete is denoted by FCK, and its value is different for different grades of concrete, M15, M25, etc. So in the symbol M stands for the mix, concrete mix, and the number refers to the specified characteristic compressive strength of 150 mm size cube at 28 days. So we have studied about these cube tests in the previous lecture, where we have been discussing about the tests on dry concrete. There we have discussed about the cube tests as well. So there you can see what is this 28 days strength and what is this 150 mm size cube in those lectures. And then you have characteristic strength of steel. As it is the lecture on reinforced cement concrete, we have been discussing about reinforced cement concrete, where the two fronts, one the concrete and the other one your steel, is also playing an important role by taking the loads separately. Concrete will be taking the compression and steel will be taking the tension. So characteristic strength of steel must be also determined, because you are designing this RCC using the limit state. Whatever loads, whatever strengths that you are going to consider in the limit state method, those strengths and the loads must be accompanied with the term called characteristic, because it is a probabilistic approach and the acceptance of probability is considered to be 5% by the IS 456. So all these values are corresponding to that normal or Gaussian distribution curve. So that is why the characteristic strength term is attached to the every material. Until the relevant Indian standard specification for reinforcing steel are modified to include the concept of characteristic strength, the characteristic value shall be assumed as the minimum yield stress or 0.2% of proof stress specified in the relevant Indian standard specifications. As we can see that the stress strain curve of steel, you can see steel is strong in tension, it is a ductile material. So there is the final yield stress is not properly determined, because it will be in a state of continuous failing. So a 0.2% proof stress, the stress corresponding to 0.2% of strain is considered to be the yield stress, because for finding out the yield stress of steel, it will be very difficult, as the steel will not fail at a particular time. It keeps on increasing its stress value, so it will be difficult to find out what is the value of stress at which it is actually failing. So that is why we are considering a 0.2% of proof stress as the yield stress. So the characteristic strength of steel is designated by the term F suffix Y, which has a units of megapascal or Newton per mm square. Now moving on to the term characteristic loads. As we have already discussed about the term characteristic, why it has come into picture and what is the graph that is addressing the characteristics term, as we have already discussed in the previous slide when we were talking about characteristic strengths. Now the same explanation or the same concept of characteristic comes into picture here, where but the only difference is that here this is accompanied to the term loads. Now what happens in limit state method is the loads must be exaggerated. That is why if you can see that the term load, characteristic load, is towards the right side of the graph, if you see. So that is why 1.64 sigma is towards the right now. Previously for the strength you have seen it here, the FCK value you have seen it here, but whereas for loads you are seeing it towards the right side. That means you have to add this value for finding out the target load. This has to be added, this has to be subtracted. So that is why for calculation of characteristic strength we have seen the graph towards this side, but for the loads we are seeing towards this side. That is the only difference between the characteristic loads and characteristic strength. The same distribution of normal or Gaussian distribution is considered, but this time the diagram is considered towards the right because the load must be exaggerated. The load must be, the structure must be designed for higher loads, though it is not encountering those higher loads, but still you have to design for higher loads. And the strength, it has a capability of taking up those loads, it has sufficient strength, but still we will reduce the strength so that we will be in a safe zone in all perspectives. So if you can see in the formula, previously we had minus here and now you are having plus there. Fm plus K into S into D, where K stands for characteristic load, Fk characteristic load, Fm stands for the mean load, and K is the distance between the mean and the design load, that is 1.64 sigma. And now you can see the constant is 2.65 and SD stands for the standard deviation. Since data is not available to express loads in statistical terms, for the purpose of this, standard dead loads given in IS 875, imposed loads in IS 875 part 2, wind loads and so on and so forth are taken. The loads are also taken from the codes. So different codes are there for different loads. Now the design strength of the material, I have told you the strength of the material is reduced. So that is why if you see in this formula, the strength, the design strength is being reduced by dividing the actual strength with the term gamma. This term gamma is called as the partial safety factor. You have come across the term factor of safety, load factor, and now a new term called partial safety factor is coming into picture. So what it means to say is that a partial safety factor is nothing but a load factor or a strength factor. This factor will be divided in the case of finding out the strength, because the strength must be reduced, as I have told you in the previous case. So the formula for finding out the design load is the design strength is the actual strength divided by the partial safety factor. And now moving on to the design loads. The design loads, I have told you, design loads must be exaggerated, it must be increased. So that is why if you see here, the partial safety factor is multiplied in this formula now. In the previous case it was divided for finding out the design strength. Now for finding out the design loads, it has been multiplied. So finally the structure will be in a completely safe zone when the load is increased and the strength is decreased. If you design by considering these values, the design will be completely all perfect and completely safe and economical in all kinds of situations and every kind of load. So this gamma is called as your partial safety factor, as I have told you. And coming to the definition of partial safety factor, it is similar like the other load factors and the factor of safeties, but when you are using these factors in the limit state method, then you call them as partial safety factors. So partial safety factor gamma m is for when assessing the strength of a structure or structural member for the limit state of collapse For the limit state of collapse, the partial safety factor is 1.15 for steel. Thus, in the limit state method, design stress for steel reinforcement is given by 0.87 Fy. So, various partial safety factors for the different loads are given. If you can see, when the combination is dead load and live load both, then the partial safety factor to be used is 1.5 and 1.5 for limit state of collapse. For limit state of serviceability, it is 1 and 1. When you are considering dead load and wind load, then the partial safety factor will be between 1.5 or 0.9 in limit state of collapse. In limit state of serviceability, it is 1 and 1. When you are considering the dead load, live load and wind load, the partial safety factors in limit state of collapse are 1.2, 1.2 and 1.2. At limit state of serviceability, it is 1, 0.8 and 0.8. So, these are the partial safety factors which are considered for loads. So, finally, by concluding, what we understood in this lecture is that reinforced cement concrete is a combination of cement concrete and steel. So, reinforced cement concrete is a material which will be used as structural members. So, in the structural members, you have other various structural members also which has to be designed. So, for designing the structural members, there should be a proper design methods. So, there are three design methods. One is the working stress method, ultimate load method and limit state method, and you have understood what is the difference between these three methods, and you have also understood the basic terminology which are associated with the limit state method. We will continue with another topic in the next lecture. Thank you.